Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont said Tuesday that he would forego another presidential bid of his own and instead endorse President Joe Biden's reelection. The leading progressive, who was Biden's chief rival in the 2020 Democratic presidential primary, told the Associated Press that he would do everything I can to see the president reelected. The last thing this country needs is Donald Trump or some other right wing demagogue who is going to try to undermine American democracy or take away a woman's right to choose, or not address the crisis of gun violence or racism, sexism, or homophobia. Sanders said in an interview, "So I'm in to do what I can to make sure that the president is reelected." Biden on Tuesday announced a decision to seek a second term, even as polls suggest that voters in both parties don't want him to run again. Democratic president will face the winner of the crowded Republican primary, which features former President Donald Trump and half a dozen lower profile conservatives. For much of the year, Sanders has left open the possibility of running again himself. On Tuesday, he said that he would not run, and he discouraged any other high-profile progressive candidates from doing so either. His decision suggests the progressive wing of the Democratic Party will ultimately unify behind Biden's 2024 bid, even if progressives aren't excited about him. People will do what they want to do, Sanders said of any other potential primary challengers. I think Joe Biden will be the Democratic nominee, and my job, and I think the progressive movement's job, is to make certain that he stands up and fights for the working class of this country and does not take anything for granted. Sanders' decision also signals that at 81 years old, he will never again seek the presidency. The silver-haired Democratic socialist with a thick Brooklyn accent emerged as a leading progressive voice in 2016 presidential contest and was in position to secure the presidential nomination in 2020 before his rivals unified behind Biden's candidacy. In foregoing another presidential bid of his own, Sanders said he would continue to fight for the progressive policies as chair of the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, in addition to helping form new labor unions. Running for president was a wonderful privilege, Sanders said. I enjoyed it very much, and I hope we have some impact on the nature of American politics. And right now, my job is to do what I can as chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee to see Biden gets reelected and see what I can do to help transform policy in America to help protect the needs of the workers. He said it was too early to say what specific role he would play in helping Biden win re-election in 2024. So a lot of people on Twitter and other corners of YouTube are disappointed by this. They're very upset. Some people have called him a traitor. Others have said they get it. I kind of want to echo, and I put Williamson's name in the video because I think that's what my main frustration is. It's more so that were Biden running for re-election and there was no one running against him in the primary, I'd be a lot more understanding of Sanders backing him, because again, there would be in that scenario there's no one else in the race. But when you have someone like Williamson, and even to an extent RFK Jr. as well, because he's also spoken about like the corruption of big money in politics, just all the stuff about the oligarchy, I would be more understanding again if it was just Biden in the race by himself. But with these other people who are seemingly leaning more left, that Sanders does have some familiarity with as well, it's all the more frustrating. So, like when he says, "I'm the last thing this country needs is some other right-wing demagogue who's going to try to undermine American democracy or take away a woman's right to choose, or not address the crisis of gun violence." It's like, well, okay, but Biden's the same person who was president when Roe v. Wade was overturned, who, when he had a Democratic majority, both as VP and as president later on, we're talking about the Obama years as well, chose to not codify it or make any attempt whatsoever to codify Roe v. Wade. And if you're talking about not addressing the crisis of gun violence, well, I don't really see what Biden is doing to address it. We've had multiple mass shootings, whether it be the one in Uvalde or, if you want to get a little more recent, we could talk about Nashville. And I don't really see him doing anything besides, he condemns it, sticks his finger up, asks the Republicans to do something, they do nothing, and then, things continue on. So that statement already kind of annoys me, because he's like, I can agree. He's basically saying things are going to get worse for Republican wins, which I agree with, but I don't really think things are that great now. The progressive movement's job is to make certain that he stands up and fights for the working class of this country and does not take anything for granted. Well, here's the thing, Sanders. If Biden knows that all the progressives in the Senate, which is like two people, but if all the progressives in Congress, whether it be the Senate or the House, are automatically, from the second Biden announces he's running for another term, going to endorse him, support him, try to help him get reelected. Why would he not take you for granted? It's not like you're saying, hey, I'm one of the most well-known politicians in the U.S. now, thanks to my last two presidential campaigns. And if you don't fight for single payer during your next term, I'm not going to endorse. I'm going to go endorse Williamson, or I'll endorse RFK Jr. I doubt he would endorse RFK Jr., but just an example. Like, where's your, if like you're basically taking your leverage of offering an endorsement in the event that he pursues more progressive actions, um, completely away, so that you can just kind of say, well, I don't want to lose my influence if he ends up winning a second term, because that's really what this is about. Unfortunately, in the very unappealing game of politics, principles tend to get compromised or otherwise thrown out the window for people to have leverage or to otherwise have some role of influence. So I would probably say Sanders is endorsing Biden again, not because he agrees with him more than Williamson, but more so because he thinks, with good reason, because incumbent presidents generally win, primaries that are featured in their reelection bids. But he thinks that Biden's going to win the primary, and then if he endorses Williamson or RFK Jr., for example, that'll come back to bite him when Biden, like shuts the door in his face, doesn't want to talk to him, and remembers that, holds his grudge. And I still don't understand the logic of that at this point, because there's plenty of things that Biden has faltered on that, were I Sanders or someone else that was serious about wanting this stuff to get resolved, I wouldn't endorse him until he either promised to do it, or I would just say to hell with him and go and endorse his challenger. Like, I guess what drives me crazy is the article makes the point of mentioning Sanders is unlikely to seek the presidency ever again. I think that's true. But at that point, it's like, okay, so what do you have to lose by not even like, not just not endorse Biden, but like what do you gain out of endorsing Biden day one of his campaign? Like, the only elections Sanders for the foreseeable future will have are Senate re-elections, and he's already winning by over 50% or 60% in all of those. So what greater concept am I missing here? It's just a really strange thing, and that's why I said progressives in Congress are so frustrating, because it just seems like at every turn they capitulate, and just even in like the most basics, like I guess I just can't imagine considering myself an outsider, someone who's been labeled by members of the supposed left-wing party as being too far left, having all these radical ideas that are untenable, and then feeling a loyalty to these people. But I've said before that one of the problems with politicians as well is that they become friends with each other. Sanders says over and over, Biden, Joe is a good friend of mine. And it's like, I guess when you're good friends with someone, you're fine with them completely poo-pooing on all of your major policy proposals, and you'll just back them blindly. So, but also I should say, and this is a caveat, as disappointed as I am that Sanders is endorsing Biden this early, because I would understand at least if he was just neutral, or, again, what I would really want for him to endorse Williamson, but whatever, I know that's not happening. I still don't think it's going to matter that much, because we've seen plenty of endorsements. I mean, let's not forget when Sanders had his big, huge insurgent 2016 campaign, he was only endorsed by one senator, Jeff Merkley. So I don't think him not endorsing Williamson is going to be that big of a deal. I think if he did endorse her and campaigned with her, it would be like a big gain for her. But like I said, we as people who are supporting her candidacy just have to go around and get her name out there and tell people who are apolitical or just don't follow the stuff as much as we do about her. And I think I've been participating in it. I haven't made a video with her like naming the title in recent weeks. She did this speech at university I was going to cover. Just have to stick it in the editor and fire up my materials. But it's just one of those things where you have to accept this is politics. A lot of people do little weird jockey stuff to try and keep position. This doesn't completely erase every good thing Sanders has done, but it is disappointing. And I think Williamson would have benefited from an endorsement from him, but we can still, pull together if we just keep getting her name out there. Endorsements are, they're not really as big of a deal as people make them out to be. they just kind of show us like who someone prefers, and gives us like I'm really disappointed with the progressives in Congress, because these are people who for the last 3 years, or I guess 2 years I should say, have kind of just sat around, and maybe they'll oppose Biden here or there, but guess what they're all going to do when he runs for re-election? Fall in line like good little boys and girls, and I'm just sick of it. That's why I said I'm not friends with any of these people, and I think I'm better off for being that, because we're not lawmakers, and voters are not supposed, and lawmakers are not supposed to be friends with each other. They're supposed to have positions that they advocate for or try to get enacted, and when they're able to sidestep somebody who agrees with them more so than a person that agrees with them less, it's really crazy. But Sanders was victim to this in 2020 as well, where Barbara Lee, who's this big like anti-war voice, endorsed Harris over him, and Carol Mosley Braun, who was the first African American woman ever elected to the U.S. Senate, she ran for president in 2004, advocating for single payer, and she endorsed Biden, who is against single payer. So this is just a weird thing with these people. They endorse someone who they apparently don't agree with on much, but they like personally. So policy be damned. Like I said, the Williamson campaign will survive, and we will keep pushing forward.